we have to talk about Loki. Let's go ahead and get that variant in. We got to switch it up. So if you are still hanging around here, and let's just say you have not watched Loki, this would be the time where maybe you want to catch us on the replay. Maybe you want to hurry up and go watch the episode. I done gave y'all 24 hours to go check it out. But now we got to get into the nitty gritty of this Loki finale. So consider that your spoiler alert. Get up out of here. Or if you don't care about spoilers, welcome. I am so happy. I am so happy with this episode. I am so happy with this series. I got a couple theories I got to share with y'all. Okay, I'm gonna try and contain myself so that we can get through the recap, talk about different things, and then we'll talk about it, right? Then we'll talk about it. But let me ask y'all this before we get on, because I do like to read all y'all comments. Did y'all find this episode confusing at all? Because I know they dropped a lot of time travel stuff or whatever. Was there anything confusing in the episode for y'all? And I'm asking that because I tried to go through my breakdown to maybe try to explain things a little bit easier. So if after we go through the breakdown, if there are still things that are confusing, please feel free to ask me, because I want us all to be on the same page on what Marvel's trying to do. So if you have questions or anything like that, let's see if I address them. If I don't, please bring them up, because I don't want people walking away thinking that this show just didn't do some work, because it did. But all right, let's go ahead. Let me pull up the stuff here. All right, so now, first of all, I told y'all this before. You always have to look at the recap. And the recap that we got was Loki reminding y'all that he was burdened. He is Loki of Asgard, and he was burdened with glorious purpose. Okay. When I tell you, that line gets better and better every time I hear it. Like, I just want to walk around saying I am burdened with glorious purpose. Do you know how to talk about some affirmations? Just wake up in the morning and tell yourself, look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I insert your name, am great, and I am burdened with glorious purpose. Ooh, wait, that is something to be said. And Loki took that and ran with it. But I've told y'all got to watch them recaps. Whenever you watching these Loki episodes or whatever, watch the recaps, because every little thing that they tell you is meant to help inform what's going to happen later in that episode. Now, one thing that is true, and we've talked about this, has been the constant theme of the whole Ouroboros thing, right? It's basically the end feeding the beginning, or the beginning feeding the end. It's that whole circular loop that's been going on. And this has been the theme, not only for this season, but from season 1 and even before that. So I'm going to show y'all how, like, not only does this season have constant loops. So season 2 loops into itself. Season 2 loops into season 1, and season 1 and season 2 all loop all the way back to Thor 1. And not only all of that, but they also loop into Norse mythology in a very interesting way as well. So anyway, I've been prepping this a little too much. Let's get into the episode. So my man is burdened with that glorious purpose. Okay. And not only that, but we also get reminded of who paved the way for him the entire time. Now, if y'all recall from my last episode, the last video, I told y'all a little theory of mine that my man was still in the woodwork. He was still working. He who remains. And it looks like that did end up being the case to some degree. But anyway, we find Loki, who just time slipped right back into the moment before Victor Timely goes outside. And of course, we saw what happens. My man turned right back into SpaghettiOs. Then Loki, he quickly turns to Obi and asks him, what could they have done better? And Obi was like, look, we just took too long and the radiation got out of control. But this gives Loki the idea to start going back in time to do things a lot faster and more efficiently to try to make up for the time. He even gets to the point where he has to ask Miss Minutes for some help with the multiplier. Now, I don't know why he would ask this crazy AI anything, but Loki was desperate, and it doesn't matter. He tried to do what he could do. But going through so many attempts trying to account for every situation really just got frustrating. And when it came to the multiplier, Obi just ended up asking Obi, how long is it going to take? Like, he went through and introduced Victor Timely and all of that. He showed them how all of this stuff was going to work. And he was like, look, Obi, just Forget all of this, man. How long is it going to take for you to just show me everything that you know? Let me know everything about time. Let me know everything about, the multiverse. Teach me everything. And Obi was like, all right, cool. I mean, it's probably going to take a couple decades, and Loki was like, man, that's cool. I'm a god. You know where I'm from? I'm from Asgard up in these streets, right? But Victor Timely was like, nah, it's going to take about a couple centuries for you to fully understand, the scientific, astronomical, physiological elements of time travel. And Loki said centuries. Yup, that's right. Centuries later. So it took him hundreds of years to finally understand everything that was in that TVA guidebook and more for him to finally get what was needed and what was going to happen, to really just expedite this whole process. Okay. But keep in mind, Loki is a god, and these gods live for thousands of years. So it was probably like a couple months for him or something. I don't know. But he had time on his hands, and that was not a problem. Now, since it literally took centuries for him to become an expert on time, he does come back, and now he can guide everybody on the process. He even got it to the point where Victor can go outside without immediately getting shredded up. Victor goes, he puts the multiplier into the machine, but Obi discovered that there was still a problem. The loom continued to overload because the branches keep expanding. And Victor says that this is because the time branches continue to scale by an infinite amount. In other words, the loom is always going to grow. Now, I think just to kind of help people put this in the to help you think about this, outside of the TVA is every and any potential thing that can happen within time, because that's all raw physical time that's out there. So, in other words, all the infinite possibilities or all the what ifs were all out there. So what happened was the loom, at least the way we understood it, was taking all these infinite things and wrapping it and tying it and twisting it into the perfect sacred timeline. Okay. So Loki was sitting here thinking, like, oh, well, if all we got to do is account for that, we just got to make the rings bigger. But you can't make the rings bigger because the rings eventually are going to stop growing, because the infinite amount of possibilities is infinite. You can't put a number, in other words, you can't put a limit on infinite. If it's going to grow infinitely, there's nothing you can do to stop it. So it was always going to grow. It was always going to overload. It was always going to do that. And this was actually, part of the design, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So this definitely was a bummer. Like, this is not what, Loki wanted to hear. He went through all this work for hundreds of years now. Let's not forget, he studied all this. He went through all these things. And by the way, let me just say, I love the editing that they did with all this time travel, not just with Loki here, but with that we find later on. I love the fact that every time Loki goes through these situations, we don't have to see every single outcome. The fact that he could just show up and say, hey, I knew you were going to say that. Hey, don't drop this. Hey, make sure you do this. Tighten this up. That implies that Loki has been doing this multiple times. And this is not going to be the only time. So I want you to keep that in mind. He does this multiple times without us seeing it, but it's implied that he kind of has been looping for a long time. So that was really good on the directors, I thought, in that regard. So now Loki's like, all right, since that's not going to work, let me go back even further to the past to when Sylvie was going to kill He Who Remains. Now, he tries to fight her, but of course, Sylvie's just a better fighter, and he just keeps on losing. And he sat here and was like, yo, He Who Remains, you gonna do something, like fight back, man, please. What are you doing? You just want to sit there and keep dying? And He Who Remains was like, oh, yeah, that's all good. It's fine. And he stopped her. He stopped Sylvie in her tracks, which means, and that implies, he could have done that at any time. He always could have stopped this. He always could have paused her, but there was a reason why he didn't. And that's something to just kind of keep in mind. And now you see He Who Remains, he asked Loki, how many times have you gone through those scenarios? He even asked him, have you learned how to pause people yet? Have you learned how to pause time? Why? Because He Who Remains knew about the time slipping. He knew that Loki was going to go down this path because, once again, he's the one that paved the way all this time. And he asked Loki a very important question. And the question that I believe, we're going to talk about it later. It's going to feed into one of my theories later. But he does confess to Loki that while Loki thought he was beating the system this whole time, this was all according to his plan. once again, this is kind of what I was talking about, right? In the last video, I told y'all it wouldn't make sense for someone like He Who Remains to not have all of this stuff planned out. His whole purpose, his whole goal has always been not only to prevent his variants and stuff from coming back, but it's self-preservation as well. He was never about to sit here and allow himself to just die, at least not according to his plan. His plan was always to keep the TVA going, to keep himself alive, and to keep his variants out of here to prevent the multiversal war. So, within those plans, he also was always grooming Loki. He knew this Loki was going to be a certain way. He knew that's why he said, "You were always my favorite." He's been through multiple Lokis, but this Loki, this variant Loki, he knew how far he was going to go. Now, there's still a thing that he didn't know, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this was always part of He Who Remains' plan, and it was definitely something that is part of his character. It's part of He Who Remains' nature. All right, let me grab some of these here. Kiki. He Who Remains didn't have to go mocking my guy Victor like that. He did not have to. He was like, "Who'd you see, Victor? Timely." Like he didn't have to do that. He did not have to do that. But I mean, is it bad if it's your own variant? Like, it's still you, right? Kind of. I don't know. I don't know. But thank you so much. Now after He Who Remains pretty much says like, "Yo, this is the system, this is the game, this is all according to my plan." Loki was like, I hit that finger and was like, "Yeah, I know how to pause time," proving that they've had this conversation multiple times. And He Who Remains at that point confesses to Loki that the temporal loom is not about destroying the TVA, it's all about preserving the sacred timeline. The loom is a failsafe in the event that too many branches start to appear. And remember, his sole purpose is to prevent his variants from popping up. That's why the TVA was created. Now, the TVA don't know that, but that's what He Who Remains' goal always was. So, in other words, if the TVA ever failed at their job of pruning all the branches, the loom itself would get too big, explode, prune all of the branches except for the sacred timeline. And as He Who Remains said, recreating the TVA is easy. That's not a hard thing to do at all. He can always recreate them. So, but the most important thing was preserving the sacred timeline and keeping his other variants out of this whole equation. Now, he did say that his variants are already out there. We already saw Victor Timely. We saw the Council of Kang in Ant-Man 3, which will come up again. And that there are too many of them. But Loki said that he's determined to find them and stop all of them. And if you noticed, He Who Remains like expression, he was kind of like, "Yeah, champ, I know you will." And it was almost like, I think this is one of those things because Loki's character is persistent, but Loki's character is persistent almost to a fault. And I think that this is something that we can maybe tie into. Let me see if I have it here. We can probably tie this into Norse mythology. And in Norse mythology, so there are two things, and we'll talk about one of them here. In Norse mythology, Loki is not a good guy, right? Like he's the god of mischief. He does a lot of bad things here and there, gets in trouble, etc. And one thing that happens with Loki is that he gets punished, right? So one of his punishments, I believe he goes to hell, Hel, and one of his punishments was to have like this serpent drip poisonous, like almost acidic venom on him, like for all eternity, right? And the whole thing is that this venom just keeps on hitting him, even though I think his wife tries to like grab it, but every time she empties out the bowl it like refills or something like that. But I want to say in a sense Loki is doomed to to constantly be punished in a way, and not like, I don't want to say like in a sadistic way, but the fact that he's willing to chase all these Kang variants, and the fact that these variants will keep coming, especially if you let these branches keep growing, it's almost like a fool's errand. It's almost like, and that's why I was kind of looking at He Who Remains his face, because he was kind of like, "Man, it's way too many of them out there." And Loki's like, "Man, whatever. I'm gonna get them. I'm gonna get all of them." He's like, "Yeah, okay, buddy. All right, guy. Whatever you say, man." And that's what I like about you. But I think that's also, once again, part of why He Who Remains chose this version of Loki, because this version of Loki, it's almost like he's a sucker for punishment. Like, as tough as this job is to be he who remains, this Loki is kind of built for it. He's built for doing the job that is thankless, that is tiring, and that is punishing. Because if y'all recall and go back to season 1, episode 6, or the last episode, whichever one it was, when they talked to He Who Remains, they was like, "Why do you want to give this up?" He was like, "Man, I'm tired. It's a young man's game." I mean, if that could tire him out, what do you think it's going to go do to Loki, who can obviously live longer? Like that could be something I think just to kind of keep in mind. But anyway, let me grab some of these comments. Let's see. Um, let's see. Shogun, what you say here? I don't know if the loom gets rid of all other timelines. What's the point of doing it yourself? Show was cool, but a bit convoluted, maybe. So, the point, according to He Who Remains, is to prevent other Kangs from popping up. So, this is the sacred timeline, right? And the sacred timeline, as long as it stays closed like this, then I'm not trying to muff y'all or nothing, but as the sacred timeline stays closed like this, no other Kangs are going to come up. Now, outside of the sacred timeline, you have the Council of Kangs. All the other Kangs exist outside of here. Now, it is possible that He Who Remains probably tricked all of them to be in one place to show up so that he can isolate them from the sacred timeline. However, when branches start to happen on the sacred timeline, other Kangs can pop up. So the point is to make sure you got all your Kangs over here. So now there's no multiversal war, and you're pruning all the other possible Kangs, like Victor Timely and whoever else, from even existing. And that's what preserves the sacred timeline. So He Who Remains is trying to keep the other Kangs out and prevent any other Kangs coming up. So I don't think it's convoluted per se, but that is his sole mission and his sole purpose for now. Let's see, Tracy, what you got here? Loki spent centuries learning theoretical physics, then spent centuries more learning how to control time, like He Who Remains in his battle with Sylvie. Legend. Listen, this was great. I loved it. Like this right here. If that's not character development, I don't know what is, right? Like you just had this man do all this work and then to come up and meet He Who Remains and be faced with the fact that maybe all this stuff was pointless because He Who Remains was like, man, you did all this work and my variant's still gonna show up. They still gonna be all in your face. You still gonna have a multiversal war anyway. So now He Who Remains is also feeling pretty confident here, and he's like, look, he's presenting Loki with this dilemma, and he's saying like, this is the equation that ends up what this is where you're going to end up, and he says Loki has to decide to either let Sylvie kill him and let the multiversal war happen, or he's gonna have to kill Sylvie. And Loki is like, and he was like, look, no matter what you do, the equation's gonna stay the same. So Loki looks at it and he's like, yeah, okay, the equation stays the same, but what happens if you change the equation? So if you change the equation, it doesn't matter how you figure it out, you're bound to get a new answer. And when you change the equation and you get a new answer, this is the potential game changer. Okay. Because yes, He Who Remains said that if he changes things, the multiversal war will come, his friends are going to die, and all that peace and quiet that they had was all because of He Who Remains. But Loki is like, nah, what you basically gave me was a false dilemma. In other words, while He Who Remains was like, it's got to be either this or that, Loki was like, nah, there's got to be a third option. And he opted for the third option. Now, this is something that has been, I think, proven to be very special about Loki. Loki is the god of mischief, right? The one thing that's always been consistent with Lokis is that they're unpredictable. And even He Who Remains, who thought that he could predict this Loki came up with something else, and maybe this is part of the plan. I don't know, but Loki came up with something like, man, I'm not going to fall for this. I'm going to go ahead and just change up the whole rules of the game. How about I don't even play your game? How about if I play another type of game? And that's pretty much what happened here, where he was like, all right, I know time's slipping. I know what I got to do. I'm just going to change it up. So now we see Loki then time skips back to the TVA. And he goes all the way back to season 1 with Mobius. And in this situation, we learn from Mobius a story about a hunter who hesitated from pruning a young boy and got other hunters killed. His partner did the prune, they did prune the kid, and we learned that Mobius was talking about himself as being the one that couldn't do it, and Renslayer was his former partner who was out here killing kids. But Loki is seeking a philosophical question here with Mobius, because he's sitting here asking Mobius the question of like, yo, like, how do you make that decision? How do you know who to kill, when to kill, how to kill? Like, what do you do? And Mobius gives him a pretty, interesting answer. Because at the end of the day, I think that this was more of like a utilitarian question, like, do you do what's best for the many, or do you go the opposite and do whatever's good for the few? And it's almost like a trolley question, right? And the trolley question was always, if you're driving a trolley and you can only kill one person but save five, do you kill that one person? Or maybe you're going to kill five people but they're convicts or something, or they're Hitler clones, and you save one person, do you do that? What do you do? And either way, you still have this dilemma of you're killing people, right? And it's a dilemma, it's a philosophical dilemma of which one do you do? And that's kind of what Loki is put in with this situation. However, Loki also, as we saw later on, he found a third option, which is maybe you don't kill either one. Rather, you stop the trolley by stopping yourself, right? Maybe the sacrifice is the actual third option, right? So anyway, Mobius basically gave him what he needed to hear, to some degree anyway. But then Loki decides to time slip even more and goes back to talk to Sylvie. And she pushes him by saying, who are you to take away people's ability to die trying to save themselves? And she implores to him that people have the right to die fighting. And this touches Loki mainly because you have to remember, Loki was always his argument from the jump, from the very beginning, has been about people they should have the free will to do what they want, and the free will should be protected. Now, at first, he thought he should protect people from their own free will, but now it seems like he's really starting to understand that the burden that comes with free will, and that burden is that not only do you sometimes have to let bad things happen for the sake of the greater good, but sacrifice is also a part of that as well. Woo, let me tell you something. I wanted to get theological with y'all real quick on that, but I'm not going to go there. That's not where we're going. But I got to say, that is the burden of a God. Okay. Because a lot of people say, man, why do bad things happen? If there's an all powerful God, and we're going to keep it with Loki here, right? If there's an all powerful good God, why do bad things happen? Well, because of free will. Because if you don't have free will, you're slaves. Well, do you want to be slaves? Because that sounds even worse. Okay, well, we're not going to be slaves, but you're going to have the ability to have free will. Well, if you have the ability to have free will, that means that both good things can happen and bad things can happen. And if you prevent either one, free will is taken out of the equation. And we can't have that because we don't want to be slaves. And Loki does not want to enslave people. He wants people to have free will. However, in order for free will to exist, you got to have some sacrifice. You got to give something up, even if you are that God. And that God, even if it's Loki, has to give up something to allow the free will to happen, and maybe to even save the people with free will in that process. Somebody gonna catch that, but I ain't gonna go there. Somebody gonna catch that. Somebody will catch that. But I just love what they were going with this, because again, this goes back to the burden of glorious purpose. The burden here is, this isn't going to be as easy as you think. We'll get into more of the burden later, but this is definitely not going to be that easy. Let's see. Okay, I'll wait on that. I'll wait on some of those questions because I think some of those questions will be answered a little bit later, but we'll get to that. Y'all keep asking these questions to the end. I'm gonna wait to the end to ask them to answer them. So we'll get there later. All right. So now it finally dawns on him that he needs to replace that bad thing with something better. He goes outside and he uses his magic to destroy the temporal loom. Now, remember, the function of this loom is to preserve the sacred timeline, which means with its destruction, Loki now has nothing but raw time all around him. So again, all of this dead stuff that you see here, this is raw, uncurated time. In other words, it's raw timelines, it's raw possibilities, it's raw universes. All of these things are just there. Okay. You could look to the left, there's the Netflix universe. Look to the right, there's the Sony Marvel universe. Look down there, there's the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Marvel universe. All of these things are just out there with no shape, no form, and they're just hanging around, right? Because there's no loom to shape them and hold them into place. But now these things are all at Loki's disposal, right? And you see him grabbing onto these things. He's grabbing onto that's a universe, okay? So maybe he just grabbed the 838 or 834. Maybe he just grabbed the Fox universe. Maybe he just grabbed the Sony universe. But whatever it is, he's grabbing all of these universes and he's putting his power into this. Keep in mind, Loki now knows how to control time. He now knows how to control possibilities and all of that, just like He Who Remains. And you see him now fully accepting what comes along with that glorious purpose. And you could see the crack where now he's walking into that citadel that where basically is outside of time, just like He Who Remains. So in other words, he's pretty much becoming the new He Who Remains. And as he's moving up, you see him grabbing all the tethers of time. He's grabbing all the universes, all the possibilities, all of these branch timelines. He's bringing them all together and he's connecting them together and making them all into one. And what does that mean? Look at what he just did, right? He was right here and now he's made this. Look how similar this was to the loom. In other words, Loki has now become the new loom. He is the new temporal loom for the entire multiverse at this point, or at least the multiverse that we know of. And of course, because he is from, he's got the Asgardian, mindset and culture. He is going to copy the tree. We remember this tree from Thor. That contained all the 9 realms. Well, now he's taken that tree that contained the 9 realms and basically made it the tree that contains all of the multiverses. So you see the branches are representative of the branch timelines. So now that you see the base is kind of like the sacred timeline, but all the branches of this tree can now fully coexist and they're existing in a different way. So unlike the loom before that had a very narrow specific way to be refined, Loki changed up the whole configuration to grow like a tree. A tree can't, like, there's no limitations with a tree. A tree is going to keep growing until it grows, to its content. So this basically is representative of Loki taking all the possibilities, all the universes, and letting them coexist equally. And I thought that this was really dope because I want y'all to like really understand what's happening with Loki thematically, because Loki, he wanted to be king in the very beginning. He always wanted to be king, but he never deserved it. But now that he doesn't want to be king, he ends up that way because he realizes the true burden that comes along with being king. Now that Loki has gathered all this stuff, notice here the TVA's revolution, the change in the TVA, where even on the monitor, they don't have the same scale anymore, right? Now that it's looking like now it looks like a tree, and their job has changed. Their function has changed. Why? Because Loki is pretty much, I wouldn't say Loki's running the TVA, but because of what Loki has done for everyone, and clearly they remember, the purpose of the TVA has changed. They're no longer here to prune all of the branches because now they understand that the branches mean every branch has trillions of lives attached to it. They're not going to be just murdering people just to murder them. And because Loki made this self-sacrifice to literally become the new temporal loom, they're going to do what they can to protect this new tree of this multiverse tree, at this point. But they've also changed up their assignments as well. By the way, how the hell are they sitting here still working with Miss Minutes? Like, y'all just literally gonna sit. They was like, well, do we know if she gonna kill us or not? They was like, I don't know. Maybe. We don't know. So the fact that they trust in her is still a problem for me. But we also see Mobius, and he was doing a report on He Who Remained variants. In other words, now the TVA is looking for other Kangs. And Hunter B15 did mention, do they know that we exist yet? And so far, it seems as though that they do not know. So the Council of Kangs do not know that the TVA are now looking for other Kang variants to stop them. And of course, we do get this other reference here. You might not be able to see it, but they're showing us what happened with the Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man Quantumania. And they basically said, oh, they took care of him. He's gone. So maybe this is confirmation that that Kang is actually dead and gone, or maybe not. Who knows? I do have a video on why that might not be the case. But either way, the TVA is, I think this is giving us a setup for what's to come moving forward. Now, this has a lot of implications. I think what this scene means is that there was a rumor out there, and I think we talked about this, that Deadpool, because Deadpool's been time traveling and stuff back in Deadpool 2, the TVA gonna come for him too. Now, that might not mean that they come to prune him, but there are rumors out there that the TVA is gonna come and recruit him. They're going to recruit maybe him, maybe Wolverine, maybe more X-Men, who knows? But the idea is that the TVA is going to need help in stopping all these other Kangs. Keep in mind, I know a lot of people want to jump to Avengers Secret Wars. Y'all do realize we have Avengers Kang Dynasty first. So we have to deal with whatever Kang is doing to be a dynasty in the first place before we go jump the gun straight off to Secret Wars and having everybody fight against each other or whatever. So I think we're going to have the multiversal war first in Kang Dynasty, and that's where you're going to see maybe Deadpool and all these other people doing whatever they can to like set it up. So if I had to guess, I'd say that Kang Dynasty is probably going to be similar to how Infinity War is, where the bad guy wins, and then Secret Wars might be similar to how Endgame is in terms of, all right, here's the big culmination, here's the big battle, here's all the cameos, and then soft reboot. That's my initial idea with where they're going with this. But anyway, we do see that the TVA is primed to all these Kangs, and they're going after them. Now we move on. We see Mobius gets a new file. He's leaving the TVA apparently. But he does so yes, he is leaving the TVA. And we do also see that the TVA has kind of like changed up a little bit. We see that they are a little bit more cooperative now. It's not as militant. It seems like everybody is working together. My man Obi done got his second edition, his bestseller out there. So good for him with that. What else do we have? Victor Timely. Clearly the book never gets dropped off. So this Victor Timely stays in his own reality and never becomes the next, Kang or whatever. At least not in this reality. So that's a positive to some sort. Then we see Renslayer. Renslayer, she got pruned. Now she's in the void. That pyramid back there, that pyramid, I do believe could be a clue that, remember, Renslayer and Kang, they always have a connection. That could be where Ramatut is. That Ramatut, is the ancient Egyptian version of Kang, so that could be that. And if y'all recall, on the ground, there was a nameplate or whatever of the TVA. So maybe the TVA has been pruned before. Maybe this is a cycle before. And this has me wondering, what are they going to do with Renslayer? Because it looks like she's coming straight up face to face with Eliath, right? So right there, I'm like, oh, she dead. Like, she done for it, right? Eliath straight up eats realities. But look at her face. Does that look like the face of somebody that's ready to be eaten by a reality eating monster? I don't think so. I don't think so. We'll get to her in a second. I do have a quick theory on her. But we do go back and we see that Mobius ends up going back to the timeline, the sacred timeline, where he sees himself and those bad little future felons that he calls kids. But this was actually pretty cool because Mobius is coming full circle with his character. Remember, he had that pre-FOMO, that pre-fear of missing out, where he didn't want to know what he was leaving behind. He didn't want to know what his life was like on the sacred timeline, but now he gets to see it. Now he gets to see what the motivation is for him to be in the TVA, and that is to protect those bad little criminal kids from, I don't know, jail time, whatever. So anyway, and I really, really love the fact that, both him and Sylvie were here. We don't know where Sylvie's going. We don't know what she's going to do. But keep in mind, Sylvie was the one that kind of pushed him to go see what his life was like on the sacred timeline, and there you go. There you have it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, we end with like one of the best shots. Loki looking off, and I think he's looking at his friends. I think he's looking at the timelines. I think he's looking at everybody else enjoying themselves because this was the sacrifice that he made. And this is Loki in a nutshell. And before I get to your comments, let me also mention this. I told y'all about the Norse mythology with Loki. There's some irony here because even though Loki is fighting for free will, even though he's literally giving people free will, Loki is still a character locked into fate. In other words, the same way I said Loki was kind of trapped in that punishment thing or whatever, he's a sucker for punishment. Loki's Norse mythology was that he was always destined to cause cataclysmic situations. So when it comes to Asgard, no matter what Loki does, he's the one that triggers Ragnarok. It's always Loki that causes Ragnarok in Norse mythology. Well, our Loki is still triggering Ragnarok, but for the multiverse. Okay. So his decision, no matter what it is that he's doing, he's the reason why we're going to have a multiversal war. Now, whether we win or not, that's up for debate. That's something we have to figure out. But I love the fact that this whole show maintained the core essence of what makes a Loki. It's pure chaos. Loki creates chaos. That's why Lokis in the void were giving the TVA fits, because no matter what they did, a Loki always survived. And this case, this Loki managed to still survive, but they're also fated not only to create chaos, but to be alone. And how many times have we seen and talked about Loki being alone? They've constantly been talking about that Loki, you're destined to be alone. What was it? Sif, when Sif was doing that time loop, you're gonna be alone. B5, you're a loser, you're gonna be alone, you're gonna let people down, etc. Hey, it all came true. Loki cannot escape his own fate. He can help other people, but he gonna bring that chaos and he gonna be alone. And that makes him a tragic hero. Oh, love it. 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 All right. So here's the other thing. Let me grab some of y'all comments first, and then we'll get into I'll do some of the theory. Let's see. Winsome, you could really feel Loki's pain and panic that led to his sacrificial choice in the end. His character growth has been astonishing. This is why I don't want y'all to miss what this show just did. This is character development. You had somebody who was an arrogant, egotistical, type of being. Matter of fact, this is Tony Stark. This is the Tony Stark thing all over again, right? Tony Stark started off arrogant, self-centered, and all of that, and he made the sacrificial play. Loki started off arrogant and self-centered, and he made the sacrificial play. But you know what? Even if it's the same thing, I love it because it was a journey for both. It took 10 years with Iron Man to get to that point, and it took not even 2 seasons. It took Thor 1 up to this time to get Loki to get to this point. Man, that is a nice payoff. That feels really, really good, to see all of those changes and stuff with the character, because it makes you feel like all this time that we've been sitting here watching, it meant something. The fact that we can sit here and call back to Odin, and Loki and stuff, the fact that we can sit here and go back to season 1 and all, this is why you sit here and watch all this stuff, right? Thorn, thank you so much for the perfect segue. Here we go. What is your rating on a scale from 0 to 10 for Loki episode 6? Don't give me all the extra ones. Give me episode 6. What is your rating for this episode? While you guys are talking about it, let me go ahead and collect my thoughts. Let me tell you right now, the acting, superb. The storytelling, amazing. The editing, on point. The character development, just fantastic. The themes of glorious purpose and the burden thereof. The fact that this character is bonded by fate, textbook. This is exactly what it is. I don't say this often, but this was a 10 out of 10 for me. I couldn't find any real faults in it. I couldn't find anything that did not work. I think everything they intended landed. even if it is a little heavy. But that's the nature of anytime you deal with time travel, multiverse, it's complicated because it's not real. So you have to grasp concepts that are not real. But it tantalizes the imagination. So I'm going with a 10 out of 10 for this episode. Let me see where the people are sitting there with it though. Y'all know I don't give a lot of tens, like in anything. So let's see where y'all are at though. Maybe okay, 9.8, 9, 9.5, 9.5, 9, 9.2. We got a 10, 9, 9. Let's see, 10. My computer's slowing on me now. Hold on, let me get you 9, 10, 9.25, 9, 9.8, 9, 9.5, 1,000. Now, Allie, I told you, okay. Five and a half. Come on now, stop it. 9, 9 and point 8, 10, 9, 9.5, 9.9, 9.5, 9.9, 8, 10, 10, 8, 9.5, 10. All right. And who else we got? 9.5, 9.9, 9.5, 9.5, 1,000 trillion. I don't know what that is. Too late. 7. Dang, 7. Okay. 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 10. All right, cool. I think the nines have it. I think the 9.5s have it. And shout out to everybody else. I mean, we just be here forever. We kept going. But now that y'all gave me that, now I need y'all to give me the rating for the whole season. Give me season 2. Season 2 starting right now. What are we saying is the rating for season 2 of Loki? Whew. Let me just say I didn't think that they could pull it off. They had me worried by changing the director. That still worked out. They had me worried by only going with 6 episodes because we've seen 6 episodes has not worked very much. That worked out. This is probably the best acting I've ever seen from Tom Hiddleston, damn near anybody in the MCU so far. That was great. I've been more invested in, this series as a whole, and shout out to maybe it's the time change as well, because that waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning thing, man, that was for the birds. That was for suckers. I'm sorry. Those days are over with, right? So the prime time thing was dope. The conversation, the fact that this series has people talking every week. Do you know, like I keep trying to tell y'all, the sign of a great show is what it does to people after. If you watch something and nobody talks about it the next day, right after work with their friends, it's not a great show. It might be entertaining, but it's not a great show. And this show got the people talking. How many people? We almost have 400 people in here, and it's late. You know what I'm saying? So, like, clearly, this show did the work. So, I think I'm gonna go ahead. Did it have any weaknesses? Damn it. I might, I might, I think I got to give it a 10. I think I have to give this a 10. I wanted to be extra critical, maybe give it a 9, but I don't right now. I reserve the right to change my mind. But right now I can't think of anything to make it less than a 10 because it did everything I needed it to do. You gave me action, you gave me a character development, you pushed some good themes, you definitely affected the entire MCU, you created a whole new world, you hit it with the VFX. What more do you want? You know, I'm gonna give it a 10. I'm gonna give it a 10. But let's see where y'all stand on it. 10, 10. Series is a 10, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10 and a half, 8 and a half, 10, 9, 9, 10, 10. I hope y'all know we better than Rotten Tomatoes out here. 10, 10. All the people talking. 9.5, 9, 9, 10, 9. Okay, all right. And replay gang, get in on this too now. 9.5, 9 to 6 point. Okay, 9, 9, 9, 9, 10, 9, 9, 10, and not a drop lower. I love it. 9, 9, 9.7, 10, 9.5, 9, 9, 9.8, 9. Okay. 10, 10, 9, 9, 9.5, 10, 9. Okay. Hey, listen, they did it. They did it, y'all. Like this is what we was waiting for, right? This was it. So congratulations to Marvel. I think that I can officially say that Loki is now the best series that the Disney Plus Marvel has made. Now, I will say there could be some debate because I had WandaVision as number 1. It's a little unfair because Loki had a little bit more to go with, but that's on WandaVision now. So I'm still gonna go with Loki as number one. WandaVision has now moved down to my number two. Um, feel free to let me know what y'all ranking is for the MCU shows as well. But that's all, guys.
Thank you so much for watching. This was just a segment of one of my live chats, and if you're interested in joining in on the next one, be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications for more. I've got more videos and reviews to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you all later.